My name is George Burke. I'm joined by my co-host Mike Lane tonight. We have the first of what we hope will be several debates. The first debate has Janet Oleszek, the Democrat, facing incumbent Senator Ken Cuccinelli. I'm going to do a brief bio. We are going to be questioning the candidates for the first two segments, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mike. Janet is a former aide to Congressman John Moss. She subsequently worked as a policy expert at the Congressional Research Service. She's been a teacher in the Fairfax County Public Schools, and she has been very active in both the local and state PTAs. She has an undergraduate degree from the University of California in Davis, a graduate master's degree in special education from American University. She was first elected to the Fairfax County School Board in 2003. She lives in Fairfax with her husband Walter and two sons. Ken Cuccinelli is a lawyer. He is a member of the firm Cuccinelli & Day in Fairfax. He has a variety of legal experience, criminal cases and the like. His specialty now is business and intellectual property law. Senator Cuccinelli was first elected in a special election of August 2002, and he was reelected in 2003. His undergraduate degree is from the University of Virginia. He has a law degree and a master's degree from George Mason University. He lives with his wife, Tiro, and I hope I pronounced that right, sir. You got it correct. And 5 daughters. Both of them, of course, live in Fairfax County. I'm going to hand it over to Mike to get this thing going, and we look forward to a great debate.
Good evening. I'm Mike Lane, co-host for tonight with my partner, George. This is a wonderful opportunity for the voters of Virginia to get to know the candidates, and rather than take additional time introducing it, let me say that at the outset, each candidate will get a 1-minute introduction. Senator Ken Cuccinelli won the coin flip. Senator Cuccinelli.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate your interest in this race. Not everybody gets informed on these state races. Having grown up here in Fairfax, I know that a strong focus of people who live in this area is Washington politics. So I appreciate you paying attention and informing yourself before you vote. I was first elected 5 years ago, and I would appreciate your vote again this year for re-election. In that time, I've worked very hard on transportation. It probably occupies more of my time than any 3 other issues. This year, I'm sure we'll talk about it during this session. I helped pass the transportation bill that will bring over $400 million a year to Northern Virginia in addition to the state package. I've fought for Fairfax schools by trying to get a change in the extremely unfair funding formula for our schools. I've also been a strong advocate of disincentivizing illegal immigration to our area. Those are things that I have worked very hard on. In addition, I've had good bipartisan success fighting for property rights and for mental health, and I hope we'll get to talk about these and other issues today. And when it's all said and done, I would appreciate your vote on November 6th for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Oleszek, your introduction, please.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you, and the opportunity that both Ken and I have to reach out to the public is unprecedented. This is a great experience. I have spent my entire adult life working on behalf of kids, schools, and education. And as a mom, I have to say that schools and kids are very important to me, but so is the legacy I leave my kids and grandkids. And it is for that very reason that I'm running for this office. And of course, do appreciate your vote. But the legacy is important not just in schools and kids, but in terms of the environment, in terms of cleaning up the environment for future generations, in terms of actually fixing our traffic mess, in terms of providing decent health care for those who are disenfranchised. There is a lot that I need to do in Richmond to work on behalf of kids, schools, education, grown-ups, and students, and the environment that has been so neglected in Virginia. So with your help, I will do that, and I appreciate the questions that will come.
Thank you, Janet. For the next 6 minutes or so, Mike and I are going to have the opportunity to directly question the two candidates. I'm going to go first as the Democrat on this panel, and I will be asking Republican Cuccinelli the questions. This is the fun part, Senator.
Oh, good. I've been looking forward to it.
You are a strong supporter of Second Amendment rights, gun rights, et cetera. But, you know, as I went back and looked at your record a little bit, I noticed that you didn't feel quite as strongly about the First Amendment when you introduced a piece of legislation that was termed the Scuzzball Reporter Act. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but there were some of those, and I granted they're members of the media, who suggested it was a rather stupid bill. And we'd like to keep these questions going short. I got a few of them for you, so please.
Sure. The bill you're referring to was dubbed by the reporters, and I took no offense at it, as the Scuzzball Reporter Bill. It was a reaction to essentially the invasion of victims' property when their families were attacked, killed. They had family members killed. And normally when you come onto my property, if I don't want you there, then I have to give you what's called notice of trespass. And my bill, in the instance when a reporter knew that there had been a traumatic event involving that family and knew that they were going onto the property without notice, without having contacted the family first, that they wouldn't have to be given notice of trespass, that if they were not wanted there, they could be immediately hit with a misdemeanor trespass warrant. And what it would have done is required them to call first or to contact the family members first, and to have that contact so that in that very short time period after a traumatic event happens to a family, that they aren't mobbed with reporters. And in the incident that brought it to my attention, you literally had reporters peeking in somebody's house, trying to get their attention to try and get questions answered. 3 different reporters in the same incident. So, you know, you might expect the media to have some problems with that bill, George, but frankly, my first interest is in protecting my constituents, and nobody knows when that kind of an incident is coming.
Let's stick to guns for a minute. You opposed a bill in 2003 that would have prohibited people who have been committed to mental institutions from buying a gun. You then turned around after the tragedy we faced at Virginia Tech and supported a bill that would prohibit former mental patients from owning a gun. Does it take a tragedy to change your mind? What was the change of heart on that issue?
You know, no change of heart. Yeah, I don't think you're reading the bills very clearly. In 2003, Chuck Colgan put in a bill that was defeated on a bipartisan vote in the Courts of Justice Committee. And that bill would have allowed for the depriving of people's constitutional rights with no involvement of a court, with no decision by a judge. You just walk into a doctor's office and that doctor can take away your Second Amendment rights. I assume you wouldn't feel that way about the First Amendment, George, neither would I. But, you know, recently, I am the expert on mental health in the Senate, period. And I participate in the Fairfax County TDO Task Force, where we address on a quarterly basis the needs in Fairfax and try to balance those needs. It has nurses, doctors, social workers, police officers, sheriffs, lawyers, judges, magistrates. The entire community that deals with these kinds of issues was represented. And I'm not sure who brought the bill up, but that same bill was brought up in our last meeting just last week. And I asked people's opinion of the bill. And I knew the 2 reasons it was defeated in Richmond in 2003. One was because people are very reluctant to take away constitutional rights without judicial process. And that's what that bill would have done. And 2, we don't want to ever discourage people who are mentally ill and who are willing to volunteer to get themselves treated from getting that treatment. Those are people that we will do 100 times better with than the folks that we have to force into the system involuntarily. And not one person, and there were 30 or 40 of the professionals that deal with this on a daily basis in that meeting last week, not one of them supported that bill. They all opposed the bill. And since 2004, 2005, 06, and 07, George, you can go back and look at my bills. I have been putting in bills since 2004 every single year to improve our mental health system. Before Virginia Tech, before the Sully police shooting, I was on top of this problem before people realized it was a problem.
Senator, as long as we're on the topic of mental health, how is it that you become a leader on mental health in the Senate? There's 40 members down there. How did Senator Ken Cuccinelli become a leader?
Well, of course, as I'm sure your viewers know, we have a part-time legislature. And as George mentioned in my introduction, I'm a practicing attorney. One of the things I have done since the 1990s is serve as a court-appointed lawyer in the TDO hearings that you frankly probably heard about for the first time after the Virginia Tech shooting, unfortunately. I've been working in those hearings for about 10 years now, and I've been paying attention to how Fairfax has been able to handle its problems related to the mentally ill and how that relates to the judicial system. And I have consistently sought to expand our ability to, it's not the best word, but to capture more people in the system so we can treat them. But that also results, George, in them being disqualified from firearm ownership or purchase. And my bills would have expanded the list of people who are disqualified in that way. No one else in the Senate, Mike, works in that arena. I'm the only one. That's why I've been bringing those bills for the last 4 years running.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. Ms. Oleszek, you know, there's a lot of different ways of running campaigns these days, and one of the new things that we face is an entity called blogs, which I think most of our viewers are probably aware of. Now, I'm not one of those people that thinks everything you read on a blog is necessarily accurate, but recently there's been a lot of discussion about this particular race and your campaign and the Senator's campaign. One of the things that I read was about in a previous joint appearance when asked how you would have voted for the transportation bill had you been in the Senate last session, you answered that, well, I think I'm going to have to waffle on this particular issue. Did you really say that?
You know, Mike, I agree with you. Blogs are just that. They're blogs. They're not necessarily true, and just reading blogs doesn't make it so. And had you been there, and I wish you had been, you would have seen that Ken and I discussed ahead of time what it was we were going to agree to in that debate and whether the blog reported, and I don't know which particular blog you were referring to.
Well, the one I read was Mason Conservative.
That's
Not one some of us read.
That's not one that I.
That's why
so
I'll freely admit that most of the blogs have a particular angle, and there was probably nothing fair about the way that was reported.
The blogs do
but my question,
all have angles.
But, right.
Each single one of them has an angle. They're all political angles. They come with a lot of baggage. So your question is,
my question is, did you really? No, my question is, did you really say you were going to have to waffle on that particular question, which is how were you going to vote on the transportation bill had you been there last session?
I answered that question, and I answered it rather directly by saying, had I been in Richmond, I would have been able to work across aisles to get a more complete bill crafted. And when pressed, the answer has to be, since I wasn't in Richmond, how could I have answered that hypothetical?
Well,
it was very simply, I was very clear about it. There was no misunderstanding. Whether or not I would waffle on a hypothetical.
Would you like to, now having had the chance to think about it for another week, would you like to tell us tonight how you would have voted on the transportation bill had you been there last session?
I would have voted against that bill that came out this year. Had I been there, it would not have been that bill.
I would suggest that if the Democrats had control of the Senate and control of the House of Delegates, we probably would have had a different bill, and we probably would have had a bill that had been more responsible. Janet, Senator Ken Cuccinelli has sponsored legislation that would make abortion a crime. You know, I mean, the fact that, you know, people would be a crime you get arrested for. Women could be arrested for having an abortion. You know,
and so would their
serious
doctors.
Problems. And doctors would as well.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the issue of pro-choice and life?
Well, there couldn't be a clearer distinction between Ken and me. On reproductive rights, I am right there. Women deserve to have reproductive rights. The decision to have an abortion is entirely, I believe, in the province of the woman, her doctor, and her God. And I don't think the State House has anything to say about it. Further, I don't think, in addition, that the State House has any right to prevent a hospital from providing emergency contraception to victims of rape. I think that's abhorrent.
Senator Cuccinelli has made his position on guns and opposed gun control to, in my opinion, the extreme. Will you please lay out for our viewers where you stand on the issue of guns and gun control?
My position is that more guns don't help anyone. My position is guns have no place in public places where there are children, no place in restaurants that serve alcohol, certainly in no place like airports, particularly after 9/11. Guns have certain places where they should be, ought to be controlled, and around public spaces is not where they belong.
You certainly don't oppose the use of guns for hunting and
Absolutely
and for target
not, but
shooting
that's
and for
not
sporting.
what we're talking about.
Senator Cuccinelli, I heard the statement that you introduced legislation which would send women to jail for seeking an abortion. That's not really true, is it?
No, it's not. It's quite simple. My bills in this area have been, one, shortly after I was elected, a woman died on the table at an abortion clinic here in Northern Virginia, and I introduced a health and safety regulation to try and deal with those kinds of problems. The conditions under which she was dealt with exacerbated the initial problem and resulted in her death. That respects the dignity of all women. Of course, yes, I believe life begins at conception, and presumably what George was spinning there was a bill that recognized that, but I've never wanted to criminalize the undertaking at all, with the exception of, take a look at the partial birth abortion bill that we passed a few years ago, which presumably my opponent would oppose. That didn't criminalize that among women, and it did not take that approach. There are a lot of other ways to do this. My approach in my legislation has been to try and respect the dignity of the women involved, whether or not they're doing something I approve of. We haven't been able to get simple health and safety regulation out of the Senate. Even things like, sterilized towels, emergency backup power for if you're in the middle of a medical procedure. Simple things that apply to so many other medical procedures don't protect women in Virginia. And 23 years ago, the Virginia Society for Human Life and the National Organization of Women held a joint press conference when the regulations that I tried to reimpose were first removed, and they said women are going to end up being treated horribly in these clinics. And you know what? They ended up being right.
Senator, you voted for the transportation bill in the last session, which brought a lot of money back to Northern Virginia. Would you tell us a little bit about your thinking, how that happened, and how you came to your decision?
Sure. This bill was a 65-page bill. It was a huge bill. And obviously it was a tremendous opportunity with a lot of trade-offs for Northern Virginia. It was a compromise. I didn't appreciate everything in the bill. For instance, the abuser fees, I certainly opposed, and opposed in 2006, and opposed the governor removing non-Virginians with his amendments in April. But when you boil it down, we haven't had a shot at this much money in Northern Virginia for transportation in over 20 years. And I didn't feel like I could pass that opportunity up for my constituents. And it's unfortunate that Ms. Oleszek feels otherwise, because I was the 21st vote and we needed 21 votes. So if she was there, that means there wouldn't have been a transportation bill for Northern Virginia.
Senator, you passed a transportation bill that contained these so-called abuser fees. Now I understand you want to go back and change that. You passed a transportation bill that established the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority and a similar authority in Hampton Roads, which allows non-elected people, with only 1 or 2 elected people on that committee, to actually impose taxes on people. Abuser fees are taxes by another word. You have based a good part of your campaign and a good part of your career about arguing against taxes, arguing for lower taxes. You went so far as to put out a mailer, and may I read it? Notice your new Fairfax County income tax payment is due. I presume this is a tax that you created since there is no income tax in Fairfax County. Quite frankly, I find it a little bit duplicitous for mailing to come this way with no disclaimer. So my question to you is, do you support the transportation bill, or now you want to amend it, and you say you oppose taxes, yet you voted for several of them here, and you seem to be promoting a Fairfax County income tax in one way or another with a flyer that is clearly deceptive.
Can I see the envelope, George? While you're giving me that, I will point out that the NVTA was established in 2002, not in 2007. And the bill I voted for did not have the NVTA just making a single tax or fee decision. The governor amended the bill to give them the decision-making authority, people you don't vote for. And I voted against those amendments for that very reason, because I think—
You voted for the bill, though.
I voted for the bill in February, and the governor amends it. Understand the process, George.
I understand.
And we got the amendments back, and I voted against those amendments. I didn't have enough votes to prevail, so his amendments were attached to the bill. That wasn't a vote on the bill, it was a vote on the governor's amendments. Had we defeated the amendments, the bill would still be alive. This is a point my opponent seems to continue to get confused on. And the governor is the one who moved the decision from our local governments, who we elect, to this NVTA, who, as George correctly points out, has some people on it that aren't elected by anybody. And I oppose that, and that's why I voted against those amendments. With respect to the campaign
fees?
flyer,
Let's get to the
sure, the
abuser
abuser fees we had in 2006, and I voted against them in 2006, and they were rolled in 2007 to the transportation bill. And as I mentioned, you want me to finish this?
Go ahead.
This is a governor's idea here, George. The governor's been pushing the abuser fees since he first got into office, and I've opposed them since then. But a compromise, by definition, contains things you don't like. And I didn't like the abuser fees. It was about 1.5% of the dollars involved in the transportation bill, and I had to accept some things that I didn't like to get the money for Northern Virginia transportation that we needed. That is a compromise, and I am willing to compromise when it's appropriate. But I am tough on taxes. This was a compromise. That's what it was. The mailing, George didn't show you the backside with my name on it. It's a political mailing that's pointing out that my opponent voted 3 different times on the school board to encourage the House and Senate senators from the Fairfax area in their legislative package to seek a local income tax piggybacking the state income tax. That's what this mailer is about, and that's what it was intended to convey. And he pulled the mailer out before he gave me the envelope, but it contains her record of 3 votes for that in 2004, 2005, 2006. My opponent wants a local income tax. She's voted in favor of it in the form of a resolution 3 different times, and I oppose it.
Ms. Oleszek, in your service as a member of the Fairfax County School Board, you did serve, or do serve, as the chairman of the Legislative Committee. In that service as chairman of the Legislative Committee, you produced a legislative wish list to go to Richmond, and on that wish list, you did ask them to provide for a local income tax. How big a local income tax do you think Fairfax County ought to have?
Mike, you know very well, the school board has absolutely no fiscal autonomy, no authority to raise income tax, raise any tax whatsoever. And I think Senator Cuccinelli knows that as well. Certainly the voters do. The voters were outraged at his mailers that accused me of raising their taxes. Well, the fact is,
well, I think what he did was,
I don't, nor would I.
He accused you of
However,
wanting to set in place the ability to raise the taxes.
Can I finish answering your question?
Well, I'd like to know how big a tax.
Thank you.
My question was, how big a tax should Fairfax County have?
The Fairfax County schools are totally funded by public dollars, and it only makes sense that public dollars be identified for use for public schools. I don't know why there's such a large attack on our public schools.
Okay, in another blog, actually I think it was the same blog that you don't read, so I'll confess the source on it. Someone who watched you in debates in your race for school board 4 years ago,
and the blog's name is?
Mason Conservative, same
one
as
blog.
I was
Republican. Okay. Republican blog.
Conservative blog. Identified a quote to you that said that you thought that taxes should be raised as much as 50%. Is that an accurate quote?
You know, Mike, if I absolutely believed that blogs were factual, I would be reading them too. But in fact, they're not.
So
they are hearsay, they are speculative, they are certainly spin, and they are not always true.
So we're not going to get an answer to the question, which is, did you at one point say that raising taxes by 50% would be appropriate?
You know what, Mike? I just said to you, if what a blog says is always true, I would answer that yes or no.
I think what we're looking at here are Republicans putting their spin out on a Republican blog and using it against a Democratic opponent. That is something that happens quite frequently.
Well, George, if it's not true, why not say it's not true? I mean, either is or it isn't.
Well, the fact is, you know as well as I know that arguing against a hypothetical, once again, is not necessarily the best way for us to determine the difference between us. And
Actually,
taxes, we know, is a big difference between us.
Janet, let's get back to the issues. I know you were straining to maintain control when Senator Cuccinelli was saying some of the things he was saying about abortion. Please,
was
let
I?
him have
Was
it.
I?
Let him have it.
I have knocked on thousands and thousands of doors, and I hear over and over and over again how out of the mainstream my opponent is, how extreme he is on his views, which he is, of course, entitled to hold, but certainly not in public policy. And if they don't represent the mainstream, there's no reason to continue year after year introducing legislation such as he has, preventing abortion, for example, for any and all reasons, regardless of the health of the mother, rape or incest. My community, my neighbors are appalled at that kind of continual attack on women's reproductive rights. It's just wrong.
Senator Cuccinelli was touting his vote on the transportation bill, and he cited the abuser fees, and he blamed them on the governor. My recollection is they were introduced by Delegate Tom Rust and Delegate David Albo, and they'd been introduced not only in several past sessions. You know, the abuser fees are a tax. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, the fact is that my opponent has voted against every transportation plan that has come across his desk until this session, when he voted for the transportation package with the abuser fees. Those abuser fees have been introduced for 3 years. They're not new, but as soon as he voted for it, he then voted against it, and then he called for a special session, which would have cost the taxpayers quite a lot of money, to repeal the abuser fees that he had already voted for.
Thank you, Janet. We have had a spirited discussion in the first half of this program. We blew right through the first break, and we're probably going to blow through the third break, but we will have to do a break coming up in about 25 seconds. I want to thank both the candidates in this first half for getting right down to the issues and doing some little bit of verbal fisticuffs here. We hope to have more. And in the next session, we're going to take your messages and your calls. And I hope you stay tuned. And we'll see you back in 2 minutes. Thank you for watching.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors,
Your friends,
Or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
Cultures, lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events,
entertainment,
history,
science.
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting.
Editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
and it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people,
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I'm George Burke, along with my co-host Mike Lane. Tonight we have Senator Ken Cuccinelli and Janet Oleszek. They are in a very heated race for the state Senate seat here in Fairfax. We've had a good half an hour. Now we're going to get to your questions and let them answer them. I guess I go first on this one, and I'm going to go right into a question we received from Dominic Lazaro in Centerville, Virginia. And this is addressed to both. We will start with Janet, because that's how he phrased it here. I would like to know about the Senator Mrs. Oleszek's position on this issue. In particular, I want to know about Senator Cuccinelli's position, because in her mailing, Ms. Oleszek states that Senator Cuccinelli opposes stem cell research. Is this true? Janet?
The question is it true that my opponent opposes stem cell research, or is it true that I am a strong proponent of stem cell research? It is a life-saving research that, life-saving medical research that will save not only lives, it'll save disabilities. Even, as you may recall, Mrs. Reagan proposed many different ways of giving dollars, public dollars, private dollars, in stem cell research because of the possibilities of fixing tragic, tragic illnesses.
Senator Cuccinelli?
I have Janet's mail here. It's the third time she sent out this false charge. She knows it's false, and I'll read it to you. He favors a ban on all stem cell research. And this is under the kooky list. That's her word in her mail. Real substantive, isn't it? First of all, let me let you know I support all stem cell research except embryonic stem cell research, the kind where you have to create a nascent human life and destroy it by extracting the stem cells. And I will also tell you that there have been 73 medical advances with stem cells, 0 with embryonic stem cells. 0. And it isn't because they aren't being tried, it's because they don't work. So my one objection is to embryonic stem cells, doing research on those, but I fully support amniotic fluid stem cells, umbilical cord, adult stem cell research, and all of those have shown success. Why wouldn't we want to put our money on what works anyway?
Thank you, Senator. Mike from Fairfax writes in on the email questions in, what is each of your plan to deal with the issue of illegal aliens in Fairfax County, or no, excuse me, living in Virginia? Ms. Oleszek?
Well, I believe that illegal immigrants come here because there are jobs. I think it is the responsibility of employers to be held accountable for knowingly hiring illegal immigrants. I think it's also the responsibility of employers to be penalized for knowingly misrepresenting resident status. I think it's important that sheriffs have ICE powers and facilitate deportation. There are ways of stopping illegal immigration. Businesses have a higher responsibility to take that on.
Senator?
Well, this is an issue I've already been leading on. We have had some limited success. It's been resisted heavily in the General Assembly. In the last session, only two significant bills got out, and I had one of them, and this is with dozens put in. And that should be a testament to my effectiveness. That bill allows zoning administrators to finally have subpoena power to figure out who lives in a house when they have probable cause to believe it's overcrowded. And previously, they actually had to get cooperation from the people living there until my bill passed. I've already been working on this issue, and I don't address people by what they look like and so forth. That addresses the symptoms of illegal immigration. I've also put in bills and drafted bills of my own to address businesses' role in promoting and really encouraging illegal immigration. I've already done it. I've already had success in this area, and if you want more leadership in this area, I'd appreciate your vote for re-election.
Thank you, Senator. This is from Linda Frymark. She's the chair of the Great Falls group of the Sierra Club. Senator Cuccinelli, I live in your district and tried with others to get an appointment with you on Citizens Lobby Day in February 2006. You refused to meet with me, but I managed to get an informal session with your aide who suggested you were probably proud to have the worst environmental record in the Senate. with a lifetime scorecard of only 26% with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, matched only by the bottom 6 senators, and your refusal to return the environmental group's joint questionnaire this year, why should anyone who cares about the quality of our environment vote for you?
Well, first of all, I don't believe the characterization. And during the session, we have committee meetings every day and we're on the floor. So there are people who are in the building at certain times and I'm not available because I have to be somewhere. And then they have to meet with my aides. And we obviously do the best we can to juggle those schedules. With respect to the environmental question, I would point out that it's in the budgets that I have supported that we have put the most money into cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay that's ever been provided by Virginia. We've done that for the last several years. And the League of Conservation Voters has their own scorecard, and in recent years I've actually been on the top half, certainly among Republicans. And I would point out that the developers have stopped giving me money now because I don't support their issues, because I'm cracking down on the people who are providing for the sprawl in our area, and while my opponent's getting donations from...
Janet has an opportunity to respond to that, and I just wanted to point out again, Janet, that this woman from the Sierra Club said the aide suggested that the senator was probably proud to have the worst environmental record in the Senate.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. I really am. I am proud, however, to have received the endorsement of the League of Conservation Voters, also of the Sierra Club, because not only is it imperative that we clean up the environment in every way we can, we need to teach our students their legacy in the future and how to preserve and shepherd in environmental protections. I have done that in the public schools. What I leave, as I said, my children as a legacy, and my grandchildren, and your children too, is vitally important to me and represents the mainstream of my community. This is what my neighbors want.
Thank you, Ms. Janet. We're actually going to be breaking in less than 30 seconds. I just want to again thank those viewers who asked questions. We'll pose a few of those other questions to them after the debate. Time moves very quick in this process. Again, I want to thank Senator Ken Cuccinelli and Janet Oleszek, Ken being the Republican, Janet being the Democrat, in this very tight, close, and heated and spirited race we have this year. Thank you very much for joining Mike Lane and I, and we'll see you back in 2 minutes.
Hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, mister. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. This is the final segment of our debate. This is the part we've all been waiting for. The candidates get to ask each other questions. We have Senator Ken Cuccinelli, his Democratic challenger, Janet Oleszek, and I'm going to turn it right over to you, Senator, for the first question.
Thank you, George. Janet, I'm going to re-ask you a question you didn't answer before related to the legislative package from the school board. For 3 years, you voted to seek the institution of a local income tax. Not to say that you have voted for a local income tax, but you supported a resolution asking for such a tax. If you win this race, you'll be in a position to put in a bill to get that local income tax. And my question for you is that when you were supporting that legislation for 3 years in a row, what income tax rate do you have in mind for your proposed local income tax? 5%, 10%, or some other rate?
That's a red herring, Senator Cuccinelli, and you know it's a red herring. As the legislation chair, it is important that the schools get public dollars? Who else is going to pay for our kids' education? So a percentage, since the school board has no fiscal autonomy whatsoever, how can we raise or lower taxes? And of course I'd like to lower them as well, but I can't do that. Nor can I give you a formula by which more money should come to the schools. To ask what percentage is just not a question I can answer.
Well, for most of the questions you haven't been answering, and that's part of the problem with a lot of this race, is it's all attack Ken. I have a 5-year record, I have 10 or 15,000 votes, and that's fair game. But you are ducking and weaving and waffling.
Well, Ken, I have a record too.
Excuse me, I
as
have
a
my
public
30
servant.
seconds. Yes, but you keep ducking it. You voted 3 times to ask for the institution of an income tax. Now, if you win this race, you'll be able to do it, and you won't tell us whether you'll pursue that and how much we can expect that income tax to be.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator, you, again, I want to get back to this issue of spending and the like as well, and often your response to suggestions that more money is needed in one place or another, including the schools, is to cut funding rather than find an appropriate revenue source. Now, where are your children in public schools? And how important do you believe a public school education is to Fairfax County? Certainly the employers believe it's extraordinarily important, and that's why many of them locate here.
Of course, with about 4/5 of my school-age constituents attending public schools, and as a product of Fairfax County Public Schools, and so is my wife, I'm a strong supporter of Fairfax County's public schools. I'm the only senator to attack the single biggest problem for our public schools, and that's how we get shortchanged in the funding formula. I'm the only senator to put in a change to the funding formula that treats Fairfax so badly. And yes, George, you subtly bring in the question of the fact that we homeschool some of our children. We're saving Fairfax County $70,000 a year. You're welcome. That has been a continuing subtle attack from my opponent. And I would note, last week when we were together, she said that she thought that educating her own kids was one of the most important things she could do at that time, and so she was going to stay home and do that. And I thought that was a very loving answer, honestly. But now she attacks my wife and my family for making that same decision, just as you've just done there subtly, George. Not that you didn't know the answer to the question.
Senator, actually, my wife's sister homeschooled her children, so I am familiar with it. And I actually turn this back to Janet because I messed up the format a little bit, but I'll let her respond to this nonetheless.
Respond to the question about?
Education and the need to find appropriate revenue sources rather than cutting services when we have the 11th or 12th largest school system in the nation, and the employers in our economy relies on our public school system.
You know, I'm very proud of my role as a school board member and the progress we have made. Our schools are in every high school, every single high school is in the top 3% nationwide. We graduate more advanced placement diploma students and international baccalaureate students. Our SAT scores are higher than anywhere else in Virginia. We do so well with so little in comparison to the other jurisdictions. We rate 5 out of 9 in expenditure per student. I am very proud of my school board record.
Senator, you have another question for Ms. Oleszek?
Am I still up?
Yeah, because George
I see.
Yeah, jumped out of format, so we're awarding the next question to you.
Just trying to be fair. Just trying to be fair.
I just got excited. I couldn't help myself.
I understand. I empathize. With respect to spending programs, George raised some spending questions, and I'd like to ask one. First of all, Ms. Oleszek, do you think candidates should tell voters how they plan to pay for their proposed new programs? And one example I'd like your answer to this particular on is on your website, you've said that you want to extend the subway out to Chantilly. Presumably that would go out Route 66 and up Route 50, almost exactly 10 miles. And using the Dulles Rail figures as a conservative estimate, that project would cost about $2.5 billion if it were built today. How do you plan to pay for this proposal? And do you think it's your obligation as a candidate to even tell voters how you would pay for it?
You know, Ken, I am glad to say how I would pay for it and how I wouldn't pay for it. And I wouldn't take one modality off the table immediately because it happens to be a pledge made to a conservative group that, in fact, doesn't want any taxes. But taxes are obviously part of any public solution. But that isn't the only modality of paying for public services. And I would not only like to expand Vienna Metro westward, I would like to see the metro from Tyson's Corner to the airport. I would like to see us increase the number of cars on the VRE. I would like us to do more in terms of telecommuting and job sharing. We are not going to pave our way out of a transportation mess. There is absolutely no way we can do that without investing in our public infrastructure.
Senator, 30 seconds.
All right. I asked if you thought candidates should have to tell people how they're going to pay for their proposed programs. You didn't answer that question. I asked you how you would pay for what is on your website that's presumably part of your transportation plan to extend the metro out another 10 miles, about $2.5 billion. You wouldn't answer that. You just said you wouldn't take anything off the table. But you still haven't answered the question of how you're going to pay for these things. I believe I may be the only senator who has walked into the Finance Committee every time he's asked for a new spending, a new expenditure with a budget cut or a way to pay for it. I've always done that. And I don't hear you even answering simple questions about your own proposals.
Janet?
You have criticized my role repeatedly as a school board member, even in light of all the progress that Fairfax schools have done under my watch. And I can repeat to you again, our high schools are in the top 3%. Our AP and IB students are not only achieving more, they're going into colleges all over the country and the world and making great new discoveries. Our kids are just so important to the future. How can you be attacking our public schools as part of your platform?
I don't know what you're hearing. That was a question about subway and transportation. I don't know how it got to be you accusing me of attacking public schools.
Oh, no, it was my question to you.
That was her question to you.
That was a question?
It was a
question.
question.
That was a question.
The question is, why am I attacking public schools?
Yes.
You know, the single most important thing for a Fairfax senator to try and achieve for our public schools is to change that funding formula. I'm going to rattle off some numbers for you. We pay 25% of the income taxes. We pay 16% of the sales taxes. We have 14% of the students, and we get just over 7% of the money. That's the formula when you hear about us getting $1 back for every 3 we spend. And I made the first attempt to do that in my 5 years. And I had some support. Jay O'Brien, Jean Marie Davis supported me. But you know who stood up and opposed me? It was Dick Saslaw, my opponent's ally and frankly, massive supporter, a Fairfax senator. When we take on those kinds of challenges and we don't get help even from right here in Fairfax, it's awfully tough to get over the hump on those things. The other item that I have been a strong supporter of is teacher pay raises. I have a record of voting for teacher pay raises, which gets our state money into the classroom, something I strongly support. So that, you know, the charge that I don't support public education is flatly false.
Thank you, Senator. Ms.
Janet, you
Oleszek,
have
30
seconds to respond.
What have you actually done to help public schools?
Do I get to answer again?
If she asks your question.
15 seconds.
Well, I've carried parts of the Fairfax County School Board agenda to Richmond. For instance, the Labor Day start, trying to get back before that. I have also maintained some of their employee legislation, carried that, and supported it in my committees. I already mentioned fighting for the funding formula change and for teacher pay raises.
Now, has any of your legislation passed, Senator Cuccinelli?
The myth of me attacking public schools is just that. It's a myth. I'm a strong supporter of Fairfax County's public schools, and I always will be.
Senator Cuccinelli, you have a question for Ms. Oleszek?
You mean one that I'll actually get an answer to? We'll give it a try. You've talked a lot about the school board, so let's give you one that's right up that alley. Right now, if you divide the total school board budget by the number of kids in there, the operating budget is about $13,000. That's a rough number, on average per student, just for the operating budget. If you could decide for yourself how much money per student would you want us to be spending in Fairfax, and then we'll work out where it might come from, but how much would you want to be spending per student in Fairfax?
That's a fair question. Thank you for asking. And that $13,000 is a composite of what it costs to educate a child who has significant disabilities, along with children who have no disabilities and who are what we call regular kids. It also is a composite of what we spend for gifted education as well as limited English proficiency. There are probably very few students who actually have an expenditure on their head of $13,000. In a $2.2 billion budget, there is not one number that actually fits any one student. And if you're asking the question, how would I change what we spend per student? It always has to be what their educational needs are and how they can achieve and graduate successfully.
Thank you, Ms. Oleszek. Senators, 30 seconds.
Once again, you know, I asked a question right in her subject area. She's been on the school board 4 years, and again, she wouldn't answer the question.
Janet, your turn to question the senator.
Senator, you co-patroned a bill that would criminalize women who exercise their reproductive rights and throw them in jail. This bill would make it illegal for hospitals to provide emergency contraception, even in the case of victims of rape. Why do you want to throw women in jail? And why do you want that not to be left up to her, her doctor, and her God?
I don't believe I've ever supported a bill that would put any woman in jail in the circumstances you describe. I know you don't tell me a bill number.
House Bill 2797.
What year? What year?
That I don't have.
In my time down in the Virginia General Assembly, there have been 3 House Bill 2797. So I can't, I don't recall off the top of my head which of those it would be. But I support supporting women. I've supported prenatal care that would encourage the choice for life. I've supported health and safety regulations for women who are choosing to have an abortion so that they'd be cared for properly. And I've also supported legislation that would allow for care for children under circumstances when it's more likely that an abortion would be chosen. That's how I try to support women. I do believe life begins at conception. You know, we obviously disagree on that rather dramatically, but I have a record of supporting women and their health needs even during that period of time.
We do disagree dramatically, and in fact, you introduced bills that would prevent abortion, even in the case of rape and incest. That is not what my community, my neighbors feel is fair.
Thank you, Janet. We're coming to the time in the program where each of the candidates has an opportunity to talk directly to our viewers, and each of the candidates has an opportunity to ask for your vote. I'm going to ask each candidate to limit the time to 2 minutes. Obviously, we have to bring this show to a close at an appropriate moment. And Senator Cuccinelli, based on the coin flip, you're on.
Thank you, George. George, Mike, thank you for moderating this forum. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your viewers, and I want to ask for your vote on November 6th for those of you in the 37th District. I've been there 5 years, and I would appreciate your support for staying 4 more. In my 5 years, I have fought to change the funding formula for our schools. We've talked a bit about that. And I also supported passage of the only significant transportation bill in over 20 years for Northern Virginia transportation, a bill that my opponent this week says she opposes. I've successfully obtained changes to our mental health system, improving it for children, and proposing ideas that you are going to see that are going to be the foundation of the 2008 legislative changes. And I expect to lead those changes if you re-elect me in November. I led the bipartisan fight for 3 years to reestablish property rights in Virginia after the famous Kelo decision, a fight in which I took on virtually every single special interest, developers, utilities, local governments, commercial property owners, and working with Republicans and Democrats, we won. This year, we finally got property rights protection again. I've also been among the leaders in the fight against illegal immigration, and with literally dozens of bills in the 2007 session, I was one of only 2 legislators to get a bill through to help address the effects of illegal immigration. I've supported denying public benefits and in-state tuition to illegal aliens, And I, unlike my opponent, you can count on me to continue to press for laws that make Virginia, frankly, uninviting for those who are here illegally, but without singling them out based on what they look like or anything else of that nature, based on their legal status. And you can also count on me to continue to be a protector of the taxpayers and defender of your constitutional rights and fighting for Fairfax. And I'd appreciate your vote on November 6th.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Oleszek, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here tonight, and it is a pleasure to be here with Ken Cuccinelli and listening to his views, which I have heard repeatedly throughout the campaign as views that are extreme. I'm sorry that they don't represent us in the 37th district. I'm sorry that they are not mainstream. As a school board member, as a mom, as someone who has worked in your community for over 25 years on behalf of students, kids, and education, that isn't the only issue I'm here to talk to you about, nor would it have been. Education is fundamental to our future, of course. But transportation has been broken for a very long time, and as I travel around the county and can't get from here to there, knowing that my own state senator has voted against every transportation solution until this last one makes me realize that we are not well represented. I would love to have your vote in November, because not only does transportation need fixing, there are other health issues, health care. I'm the sandwich generation, and we know very well that our parents are being squeezed with their adult parents and their young adolescents. We have big problems here in Fairfax, and our quality of life has diminished as a result of the representation we have currently had. I, too, am asking for your vote in November, because I think the moderate mainstream views that I represent, and have done so for 25 years, more closely look like you.
Give her 15.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank, first of all, our viewing audience. I want to thank Senator Ken Cuccinelli and Janet Oleszek, Ken being the Republican, Janet being the Democrat. I want to thank my co-host, Mike Lane, for this show on the 37th Senate District race. But most importantly, we want everybody to vote. You know, this is a democracy. If you don't vote, don't complain. And historically, on these years, we don't have a good turnout. You need to get out there and vote. Thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next debate.